What happens when a king abandons his kingdom? That's right, the Dark Ages. With Lockie away with hockey commitments of all things, it has again fallen to me to lead this broken, fractured mess of a group through this period of instability. Joking aside, one can't help but assume that this is exactly how Arthur Dials feels, in charge of the Victory, attempting all he can to get results after PK's departure, to mixed effect, of course. Jordan Lawton scored what may go down as one of the greatest goals in Australian football to win another match for Western United, who continue their fine form. And Melbourne City are having no problem scoring goals, even without any of their attacking players. Meanwhile, Sydney are almost upset by the Jets, though can you really call it an upset given the Sky Blues' recent form? The Raw, Perth and the Phoenix all continue to struggle. MacArthur Monday serves up another classic fixture, and there's been a few ins and outs ahead of the transfer window opening next week on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Jacob Stevens, of course, again taking over from Lockie hosting duties. I've launched a bit of a coup, I suppose, to take over and become the face of the podcast. But no, I'm just doing what I can to fill in while he's gone. But I'm joined today by two wonderful guests. We've got Poletti in the house, fresh off the back of being in attendance at the MacArthur Monday game. Poletti, how are you doing? What are your initial reactions from that game?
It was very humid. It was very muggy. I'm very glad to have left the air-conditioned press box and be back in my air-conditioned house because the grand total of 10 minutes that I've spent outside in the last 4 hours, no thanks, I'm good. The storm started to roll across about 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I'm just like, oh no, here we go. Another game, another MacArthur game that's going to be delayed by a storm, and it disappeared after about half an hour, but it's just brought massive amounts of humidity with it, and honestly, I'm very much ready for the cooler weather tomorrow. But on the game itself, I thought it was an interesting game. I think the humidity definitely played its part. In terms of there were periods of sluggishness between the two sides, a little bit of controversy, which I know we're going to touch on later. Yeah. But overall, I think very good MacArthur Mondays, and I'm looking forward to the next one in a couple of weeks against the Phoenix.
Well, there we go. I'm also joined today by Will Booth. Will, that same weather hit your part of Sydney?
Yeah, just muggy and gross today, and storm coming overhead. So not a great day for it. I had a blackout at work as well today, so not great weather. Causing a bit of a ruckus, but yeah, no, keen to get going tonight.
It might not be great weather, but there's been some great football this round in the A-League. Western United, in one of the craziest games so far this season, a fantastic comeback for them to win 3-2 against Perth. Really good to see them fight back to snatch victory in added time, and to see as well that the youngsters were the ones getting involved, Matt Grimaldi and Jordan Lawton scoring the goals. And it sort of seems like at the moment they're in really fine form. They were sort of started the season, and quite a few of us were perhaps suggesting they might finish bottom 2, bottom 3. And they seem to really be the only team in that bottom group that have sort of stamped their authority and started to get some points. So, Will, I'm going to throw to you. Do you think that Western are a legit competitor? Like, how far do you think they can go?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's taken this long because, I mean, Aloisi has had, a lot of the kids to throw at this season, especially, and kind of introduce them. And so I kind of noted that at the start of this of the season as well, that, yeah, it might take some time for this team to click. But, once they do, then there could be a team if the youngsters find their feet. And, yeah, it certainly looks like they have. And no shortage of goals, really, and an exciting team going forward. So that's what a lot of teams are kind of struggling for is the goals and where do the goals come from. But we haven't really asked that of Western United this season because, they can score and in a couple of different ways as well.
Extravagant ways. I mean, that Jordan Lawton goal, right? Like, I think honestly that's one of the best goals scored in the A-League. That just an insane area to try and hit a bicycle kick from number 1, to do it in added time number 2, for it to be the winning goal number 3. Pretty sure it's his debut goal for the side as well. And then he got sent off afterwards as well. Just a classic A-League goal. I think that was a fantastic hit.
Yeah, a perfect story with all that narrative thrown in there, right? Like, it was the technique of the the bicycle itself was excellent, and it was a clean connection. We saw Piol's was maybe a bit of a different and a bit not a miscue, but it wasn't that perfect execution, and I don't think we've seen a perfect execution of a bicycle really in the A League. So I'm with you on that one. I think that's one of the goals and the most important goals. Considering all the context, that was just incredible, and the red card to top it off was fantastic, and I loved that reaction that he got from the subs bench and all the team, managers and stuff on the sideline after. The happiest red card anybody's ever gotten in their life. So that was awesome to see, and yeah, just I was saying before, it's just clicking. They've got Thurgate. I feel like is just such an important player for them, and he gets in those areas. He has the 2 assists in this game, obviously, but he's so good and finds himself, with those runs in behind and just finds himself in the pocket so often. For his first assist, we saw it as well, for Grimaldi's goal. Just runs beyond the defense, has that end product, like has that final ball. He's probably got one of the best final balls in the league, if I'm honest. His deliveries are so consistently, excellent, and always he does put it on a platter for his teammates often. And, Western are finding the class, and they're finding themselves in the right areas to put them away. So very dangerous side, like very, very dangerous side, put many goals against teams that you wouldn't have expected this season. So yeah, as we said, it does seem to be coming together and clicking, which is really good to see. It's an exciting, they've won the comp before. It's not like a new force, right? But it's just a different team. Like they're doing it in a different way, and that's refreshing to see.
I mean,
what's quite funny here is
the Western United have a penchant for scoring these sort of amazing sort of goals. I mean, there was the scorpion kick last season, bicycle kick this season. Like what's next? Like, what are they going to do next season to top all of this? And I mean, I think the last time I saw a successful bicycle kick in Australian football, it was a Wanderers Academy game in NPL New South Wales men's against Manly United, and that was coming up on almost a year ago now. Like it's. Yeah, so it's been a while since we've certainly seen one in the A League, but yeah, it's how are they going to top this next?
Well, you know what hasn't been a while though, Poletti? Now you mention it. This is the second time this season that a Western United player has both scored a goal and then also been sent off in the same match against Perth. Obviously, it happened to Dylan Leonard in their 3-1 victory earlier this season, and now it's happened here for Lawton. So perhaps there's a little bit of a curse here. Western players don't want to score against Perth because you'll get sent off. But while most people were sort of quite enthusiastic about this game and the result, and obviously that goal, Poletti, I know that you had a bit of a gripe for it as a glaring example of perhaps one of the issues with the A-League, the distribution of games on Paramount Plus. Do you want to explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so this was a point. Sorry, I'll go back to the previous point first. It's almost like when you make a wish upon like the monkey's paw, where it's just like, okay, I want to score against Western United, against Perth Glory. Okay. But you get the
You'll also be sent off.
It's like you've got to be very specific with those wishes. But yeah, no. So this was a point that was raised on a Friday afternoon on Blue Sky by Benito Will. Something that the APL has never figured out since landing with Paramount Plus as a broadcaster. There's barely even a campaign by the league or clubs to establish a small network of pubs that will definitely have games on. And this comes off the back of the closure of the Ladies League, which is one of the few venues that I was aware of that routinely showed every single A-League's games. There's nowhere for people to go and gather where they know for certain that there will be these games broadcast because venues don't want to show it or they don't have Paramount Plus. If I go into a pub and I go, oh, can you change the channel over to ESPN? Staff know how to do that, straight off the bat. It's almost by default. You go, hey, I need you to download this app, launch this streaming service. I need you to sign up for an account. I need you to do this. Like, no one's going to know how to do that. It'd be like asking them to load up Netflix to put on the Jake Paul fight a few weeks ago. Like, if the venue's not prepared for someone coming in to ask for it, they're not going to know how to do it. And so it's like, if you're the APL, why couldn't you go to 5 to 10 pubs or clubs in each major city as a start? Or we know that there's groups that own multiple venues in every single city. It's like, hey, we want you to be our official pub broadcaster. We'll hook you up with Paramount Plus subscriptions. We'll send someone down to train your staff on how to load it up onto each TV or onto a select group of TVs or whatever it is, and we'll run an advertising campaign and you work it out that way. Because I look at this game and in particular the ending to the game, 2-1 Perth winning 10 minutes to go, the results all but done and dusted, and then if you see some half drunk people who are sort of paying attention to a screen in the corner, and they look up and all of a sudden it's 2-2, and it's like, oh, and then they see that bicycle kick 3-2 late winner. It's just like I know I'd want to come back tomorrow to see what the A Leagues had next if I didn't have Paramount Plus at home. Like I'd want to see what sort of things got dished up for it, and I think that's something that the APL really needs to work on is their distribution network. Because in years gone past, and it sort of coincides with the highs of the A Leagues, they're on Fox Sports.
Yeah.
Every pub and club worth their grain of salt in this country has Fox Sports and ESPN and these traditional mainstream networks. They don't have Paramount Plus. They don't have, like, sometimes you try telling them to find 10 Bold and they're not going to be able to find it on the television set. Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like they don't have that ability to be in front of the casual fan who watches the Premier League, watches the European leagues, where they can go to, like, venues have Optus Sport, because they'll go there to watch the Premier League. But yeah, so I think that's something the APL really needs to work on over the next 12 months, possibly even longer, particularly if when the contract comes up, they're going to re-up with Paramount CBS, is this distribution sort of network. Because they're missing out on this key demographic that may not reflect itself in the immediate figures, but who are a crucial part to the hype. Because it's all well and good to have sold out stadiums whenever the derbies roll around, and those stadiums aren't even selling out anymore when the
Yeah.
derby rolls around. Like, it's all well and good to have high crowd numbers there, but how are you drawing in the casual fan who's not keeping up week to week? And stuff like this can only help.
And what do you think that's perhaps why so many football fans in this country, got excited by the whole DAZN buying Foxtel deal? Obviously, we touched on it in an earlier podcast when it happened, but you mentioned there every pub has Fox Sports, and it's just a packaged thing. They know what they're getting. They can get a massive amount of sports on it. Perhaps it's this, that's why football fans are sort of trying to cling to DAZN, trying to make an entry into Australian football, because, well, it's just going to be packaged again and the pubs will have it, and it means that it's more accessible and easier to watch. So you mentioned, if they do stick with Paramount, it's going to be an issue that they have to resolve, but perhaps the entry of DAZN into the market might actually be a good thing for the sport.
Yeah, so I had this exact discussion with someone else as well, that I think we know, or I should say, there is probably the expectation there that DAZN will come in and they'll get rid of the set-top box business that has been flailing for Foxtel for quite some time, and it'll all move to streaming. And so I think what this has the chance to do, assuming that the deal goes through and these changes are made, that it will open up these venues, pubs, clubs, what have you, to moving into the streaming idea, as opposed to having like a centralized few set-top boxes linked to certain TVs within their venues. If it can all just be controlled off the remote at the touch of a button, I think that will help a lot of venues be open to the idea. I mean, I remember it was one of the morning shows a few years back, on free-to-air television. I think they were interviewing Matt Damon at the time, and he was filming a movie somewhere here in Australia, and he had to go to one of the pubs to film it, to film the interview, because it was the only place in the town that had a decent internet connection because of the TV and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, if you can sort of open up these venues to that sort of idea, which I think that the DAZN deal will, is you have this, you have this willingness then to, okay, we've got this streaming service. Well, what about let's have this streaming service and that streaming service, because we know how to do it now. We've got it becomes second nature, as opposed to now it's like, well, okay, we've got our Foxtel, we've got our ESPN, but we don't have any of the streaming services. So why would we add it when we've got everything we need right now?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's sort of wishful thinking towards the future, I suppose. And a fan base that's definitely going through that at the moment is Perth, the other side in this game, because they're just continuing to struggle at the moment. I mean, it seemed almost impossible for them to be losing or to have lost the game from 2-1 up, literally minutes left in the game. And it's kind of rare for them this season as well, right? Because they've not found themselves in winning positions, I don't think, like, at all. And so I suppose a bit frustrating to see it go to waste. And, you know, fans have been showing their disdain for the club's performances in recent weeks by just not showing up to the game in the first place. It was a really poor crowd there. But, you know, for those who did turn up, thought perhaps there was this glimmer of hope and it was snatched away from them. And it just sort of seems like Perth, it's one step forward, two steps back, right? Because, you know, they get a really good start to this game. You know, Taggart gets on the score sheet again. He's looking in good form. The team look to be playing quite well, and then they just throw it away in the final few minutes. It's got to be really frustrating for everyone at the club there.
Yeah, exactly as you said, they just haven't been in this position enough, and bloody hell, you can tell. Like straight after they conceded the one that got Western back into it.
Yeah,
it was just from kickoff. It was just negative. They just pumped it straight up the field, and then just turned it over, and just then faced a wave of Western attacks. And it's just, you know, a team playing with confidence and with a belief in themselves. Don't do that. They want to hold the ball, even, you know, go forward themselves and look for a winner themselves, or knock it around if they are looking for just securing some points. But just that's so indicative of just where they're at right now. They're just inexperienced in these positions, even when, as you said, they have played good football as well. And I think, you know, we're seeing it. We kind of knew that Perth were in a transitionary year, and you know, that was just going to be part of it. This game was probably, it has been one of the best so far in terms of, you could see a little bit there in it.
Yeah.
The fans probably were feeling, you know, up until the 85th minute mark that, oh, okay, there's something to look forward to, and it would be an unfamiliar feeling this season for them. But there were glimpses of you know, a team coming together and playing exciting football. And I think there are a few good places to look for hope. You know, like Pearman came on, that was his debut and starting debut as well, and did really well, linked up with Taggart really well, I thought.
Yeah.
You know, was dropping deeper and then blinking play up and put in Taggart for the first. And but yeah, just a lovely ball over the top, and just had a really good touch on him, and struck one from distance, drew a good save out of Sutton, and you know, there's enough. There's things like that going on in the game that will be giving the Glory fans a bit of hope. But yeah, it just doesn't help. You know, games like this, it just felt inevitable at a certain point as well, which is you know, just a lack of confidence from the players, and just a lack of understanding of game management, really, because they just could have done better in terms of, it's not like, you know, okay, you can set a worldy bicycle, like, fair play. You have to, you know, hold your hands up a certain point and go, that's what happened.
Nothing we can do about that. Yeah.
Nothing we can do about that. But they could have kept the ball. They could have held the ball up
Yeah.
in Perth's half. They could have done in Western's half a number of things. So they are to blame in a way. But yeah, Western, I mean, fully deserved with that winner. That was a worthy winner for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned a bad crowd there in the Perth game, and I suppose in the next fixture we're going to look at here, Victory and the Wanderers, it was sort of a disappointing crowd. Yes, it was over 10,000, but by 25 people. The official record shows 10,025 people were in attendance. I mean, the positive was that there was a full away bay, right? The RBB turned up in numbers, and it feels like really the first time they've done it in a number of years. And the atmosphere, at least watching it on TV, it sort of felt a bit like one of those 2013, 2014 matches. You know, the North Terrace was pretty full away bay, full of RBB, really good atmosphere. But then, of course, because it's Australian football, something had to happen, right? And that's exactly what happens. Flares let off on the RBB, and then there's a whole bunch of, nobody's 100% sure on what exactly happened, because there's a bunch of sides to the story. But the RBB then ends up leaving the ground. They're saying it was a walkout, a protest, because of the way that some of their fans were being treated by police. Others are saying they were kicked out by the police. we're obviously not 100% sure what it was, but Poletti, a bit disappointing to be starting to get this stuff back into the league where we've got this good active support and good traveling support, and then it just, again, we can't go 2 or 3 weeks without something like this happening.
Yeah, look, for me, look, the league needs active support and it needs travelling support. But not to do anything with flares. It's been drilled into everyone time after time after time, and I don't care if they do it in Europe. I don't care about all of this. You're in Australia. You have to deal with Australian stadium and Australian policing standards
Yeah.
as much as it may slightly detract from the atmosphere in the way that you want to bring it. And I know that, police and authority don't necessarily help themselves at times with over policing, but don't give them a reason to come after you at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm trying to think of a good example to use here. It's like bullfighting, right? You're waving the red flag at the bull. You're inviting the bull to come after you.
Yeah.
And then what? You're going to act surprised when the bull actually charges you?
Yeah.
I think, look, from what I've heard, this was kind of a little from column A, a little from column B as to who's at fault here. I just think don't give extra incentive to the authorities to want to do something about it when they already have biases there. Either rightly or wrongly, they're there. You don't need to antagonize them extra. And so, look, just chant, stand up, have a good time, but don't light a flare when you know it's going to get you kicked out and then complain that you've been kicked out.
This isn't a debate about I think I'm pro flare overall, right? But exactly as you said, that's not, you have to play the hand you're dealt kind of thing and abide by the laws here. And at a certain point it kind of gets tiring looking at the fans, and it probably is only a couple of fans that create this situation, but it's like we all know how it is, and it's just it's tiring to have this happen in the setback, and we just can't have nice things ever. And I don't know, just frustrating overall. And you understand why they left, and we've seen things floating around online, and nobody wanted to fess up or call people out and snitch on the offenders. So it's just annoying that when a few people break the rules, like everyone's punished for the fan group, and for the RBB that would be very frustrating as well. But it's just this snowball effect of it's never it's unrelenting really, the issues and the problems they face. So 100, as you said, it's always somewhere in the middle. It's never here. It's always more somewhere in the middle, but frustrating nonetheless.
And I think that's it, right? It's frustrating because, yes, okay, there is over-policing at football games. That's been documented. We know that for a fact. But the counter to that is, okay, so show that you can regulate yourselves. and it's clear that just doesn't happen. And so it's sort of like, if you can't make the argument that you don't need the police presence there, like you said, Poletti, just don't give them a reason. Right? Don't give them like everybody was behind them at the Sydney Derby last year when they weren't allowed into the stadium because of their banner, right? They did nothing wrong there, and then they weren't allowed in. I think we can all agree that was a poor move from the police force. But in this situation, you can't really argue with it because they did something illegal and they were kicked out for it. Like, there's sort of a little bit of hypocrisy, I feel. And then, like you said, Will, it would be really disappointing and frustrating for those in the RBB who know they don't do anything wrong. And it's sort of, it does feel like they're being punished because of what other people are doing. But then, like I just said, the opposite to that is, well, you've got to be able to enforce the rules yourself on your own group. And if you're not going to, I know that there's the whole, thing against snitches and stuff like that. But if you don't want a massive police presence, you've got to do that, right? You've got to call people out for what they're doing. And it just doesn't seem to happen much. But for all the chaos that there was off the pitch, on the pitch, there was actually a really good game between these two sides. The victory, able to fight back and get a draw with a late penalty by Ryan Teague, and he was really the difference maker in this game. He was involved in both goals for the victory. Obviously, in the first one, it was a corner routine, and he put the ball into the box. I think he got a flick on by Mashash, and then finished in at the back post by Roderick Miranda. And then, as I said, he scored the penalty late on in the game to equalise as well. And he's been a really quality player for them so far this season, Will. In the heart of the midfield, we've spoken a lot about him, but it seems like just in some more sort of mainstream media outlets in terms of A-League coverage and on social media and stuff, he's starting to get the plaudits and recognition that sort of his form deserves.
Yeah, Socceroos call up when. Like, it's just a matter of time, right? It's coming, and he just he's such a consistent, one of the most consistent players in the league for sure. Like, he's got a really, really high floor. I don't remember him dropping a stinker like ever. Basically, he just has such a consistent performer that is just a perfect player to have in the heart of your midfield like that, and just keeps things ticking. Has input at both ends, of the field, and just an all round performer. Calm with the penalty at the end. Yeah, what can't he do basically? So
Yeah.
No, we'll be called up. Soccer is definitely sometime soon, and would be absolutely deserving of it. And as you said, a great game today. I think also Lawrence Thomas was a standout performer for me as well. A couple of great saves there, and the saves that are kind of, they look easier than they are. Like that kind of style of save. That one that looping one, he just gets up really well for, and then a couple of touches he flicks Mashash's shot, which was a thunderous strike, just onto the bar and over, and always solid there, and a fascinating game. It's good to keep on focused on the game, because a shame that the crowd troubles kind of strayed us away from that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that Lawrence Thomas performance sort of highlights that there's still the same old problems there for the Wanderers, right? I mean, they can go forwards, they can score goals really easily, and they look good doing it. Milanovic back on the score sheet as well, which is good to see for the youngster, but they just cannot defend or see out a game to save their lives, it seems. They did the job against Adelaide away from home, which was an impressive performance, but weren't able to repeat it here, even with that performance from Thomas. He made some good saves, but as a goalkeeper, there's only so much you can do, right? And if you're constantly bombarded with shots, and then obviously it's a penalty, which is always going to be a difficult ask for a goalkeeper. Just the Wanderers just cannot sort things out defensively, Poletti, and perhaps it's an issue that Stajic needs to focus more on, right? Because he's talking all the time about, putting together good performances and making sure that they're playing the way that they want to play and scoring those goals. But at the back, when you're leaking as many goals as they are, it's difficult to get results.
It is. 26 goals for, 22 goals against this season, 11 games, 4 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses. So pretty evenly spread across the results and goals for, goals against. Could we just be looking at a situation where their defensive issues are something that aren't going to be solved unless they can get creative in the transfer window, and so therefore Sajic almost has to revert to a plan B where it's like, okay, we have the attacking power, let's just outscore our problems?
I mean, that's sort of what Adelaide did a couple of seasons ago, right? And it's something Colviet said in a press conference once. He was asked about how you're going to, the Mariners have scored 3 against you in both games this season. How are you going to get past them? Score more goals than them, right? So it's an approach that they can take forwards. And I do think that it's perhaps the personnel in that defensive unit that's the problem, right? Clisby again had a pretty poor game, and he was sort of culpable for that penalty. Now, I've not actually seen too much discourse about this, but the handball that led to it, it's one of those ones where it's, as a player, you'd feel hard done by, right? Because he's trying to go in to block the ball, he's falling down, his arm's out behind him. But then on the other side of things, that is a well-hit shot going into the far corner, and that arm has stopped it from going there. So for mine, I think a pretty clear-cut penalty. But I'd love to hear from the both of you if you disagree, you think it might be a bit harsh, or if you're in agreement with me.
Like, my take is that the arm's not on the ground yet. It's not like his arm is planted on the ground and he's supporting himself on the floor, right? So it's on the way down, and I know it's harsh, and where else are you going to put your hand, right? You're not just going to flop to the ground. There's no way around it, really. But also, it's away from it. Like, it is an extra limb, and it is an advantage. You are gaining an advantage by that being there and blocking the shot. As you said, it was probably going to travel in. So like a harsh one that sucks if you're a Wanderers fan, but also by the letter of the law, it's a pen. So can't have too many complaints with that one.
I've got no differing thoughts from
Yeah,
either
yeah.
of you on this one. This is bad. This is what they would term bad radio, where it's like all the hosts are in agreement
Everyone's in
on a
agreement.
particular topic. Like there's no discussion point to have.
We've got to get Christian to dial in because I'm sure he'd have something to say.
Yeah.
But
just
go
to go off the defensive issues, like you've got Josh Brillante as a centre back. I think that a few injuries have revealed that they're just super thin, especially at centre back. So it's just for the next little while, it's going to be a makeshift defense. So it's not like you're reading too much into the bigger picture stuff. It's just, you know, how things have fallen so far that you're just left like this, and you've got an inexperienced, you know, defenders in some part. And I like the look of Bonatig, but yeah, it hasn't had that many minutes. And then you've got maybe some players that have been around the A-League maybe too long, some would say. So, you know, it's a dichotomy in that defence. There's a duality of the, you know, one half of it and the other half, but it's just going to happen. So, but, you know, they're still an exciting team, and you know, the games that they've been in, there's not many duds so far. They've been entertaining ones. So goals at both ends whenever Wanderers play.
Yeah, just before we move on from this, I do want to touch on the defensive personnel as well. We know that John Taywalk's been dealing with injury issues, but there were reports, and apologies if you guys discussed this last week. I've been dealing with so much stuff, I completely forget what's been discussed and what hasn't at some point. But there were reports last week that the Wanderers had offered a deal to Milos Degenek. So I think if that's true, like, do we think that Degenek at this stage of his career could bring anything to the Wanderers defense? He spent some time at Columbus Crew. He went back to Red Star. He sort of floated around Europe, MLS the last few years. He's been in Socceroo squads. He's been out of Socceroo squad. So like, he's very clearly a talented player, but like, can he bring something to this Wanderers defense?
He does. I think he would be a signing that could just transform the defense. Honestly, he's super solid. I think he was too good to come to the A-League at you know, at certain points of his career, and now seems like a great time. So I honestly, signing him would I think have a pretty transformative effect, and could be the answer. So especially to play alongside a young Australian like Bonatig, and you know, nurture him through games and stuff like that. So no, I think that would, or in my head, work very well.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, it's probably worth a punt for them at this point because they are so thin defensively that they are playing Brillante at centre back. You know, you just need bodies in there. And if it's somebody like Degenek who's got, you know, a ton of experience at some really high levels, yeah, it's worth a shout. And there's a couple of other Australians that are going to be available too in this window. As far as I'm aware, Harrison Delbridge hasn't re-signed a contract. He will be off contract in January. Obviously, Thomas Deng is another one. So while it was sort of slim pickings in the window in the off season, this January, you know, there's a few really quality Australian defenders that are available that teams might look to snatch up. But moving on from a team with the Wanderers that's struggling with depth at the back, we're moving to City, who have struggling with depth up front. But for all of this talk, I mean, we've been talking about it on the podcast, right? Who's going to be scoring goals for City? It seems it doesn't matter, and they're not having a problem with it. They're scoring goals anyway. They're spreading the love around. It was Atkinson and Poletti were the goal scorers in their game this weekend. You know, it doesn't seem to have affected them, this injury plague that they've got, right? It's full credit, Will, to the playing group for being able to step up and do their jobs in this scenario. And I suppose credit as well to Vidmar for being able to get them motivated to be able to go, look, yeah, we're suffering right now and things aren't going our way with injuries, but this is a chance for you guys to go out there and show why you should be in the team every week.
Yeah, exactly. I think City are a team that you know, the products coming through their academy they look always like the most polished players coming out of academies, right? I think they've always, you know, in the last couple of seasons, definitely had the youngsters that come in and just can get going straight away, and they look like the closest to the finished product out of, I'd say, a lot of the youngsters that come through. You know, a lot of them take a season or you know, similar amounts of time to get started, but a lot of these City products kind of just come and really perform straight away, and they always have that little bit of flair. They play with freedom. It looks like, you know, they're not just playing exactly how they're told in this regulated way. They do come in and impress. So if any team is to deal with this and try and replace some big name players that are out, and are proven players. There's young kids are coming through, or youngish kids. Poletti has been around a little bit, a couple, 22-ish. Suleimani, I think, has some high
Yeah.
play, interest on him, and a lot around him being a long-term kind of player and an impressive player up there. So yeah, as I said, these players just come in and have that little bit of class, and they've done really, really well. And it's down to Vidmar, it's down to giving them a platform to perform. That's what it looks like, right? And maybe these expectations are lifted somewhat of oh, okay, all these players are out, like now's the time we can take City if you're in the opposing team. But then that gives these kids a bit of a freedom to play, and just everyone in the team a bit of freedom, really. I think the pressure's off them a little bit, and a few preseason thoughts had City not up where we're used to seeing them. But it looks like they're dealing well with that, and just playing with that freedom that I said. So no, it's a good performance here, and just enough to see out of a Phoenix side that maybe looks a bit like they're out of ideas.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue, because you're right. What's wrong with Wellington at the moment? I mean, they're just, it feels like they can't impose themselves in games. And I know that away from home, that's not how they like to play anyway, but it just seemed like they had no semblance of control whatsoever. They struggled to retain possession. They didn't defend well as a unit. They didn't really create many chances from build up either. They were reliant again on transition. Poletti, they've got their own injury crisis a little bit as well, right? They've got a ton of key players that are out. Marco Rojas, one of the big ones among them. But I can't also help but feel that it's a side that seems like it hasn't quite got the grasp of what Chiefy is trying to get them to do. And so I'm almost sort of thinking, is he making it too complicated for them, right? We know how tactically astute he is and how much he loves to talk about it. And it's fantastic, but sometimes it can be difficult for players to grasp a hold of that. And it does sort of seem like that might be one of the reasons why they're struggling to get performances this season.
I think, just to the injuries point, when you've got players coming in and out of the lineup, on this sort of issue, in such a tactically advanced system as what Chiefy tries to play, that's very hard to get everyone to put together, because, as you said, you might be trying to get them to do too much, or it could just be a case of, well, okay, some weeks I'm in the lineup, some weeks I'm out. You don't get those repetitions of, okay, I need to do this, I need to be here, I need to be there. And training's great for getting the fundamentals of those down, but you can't simulate that real game environment, a competitive fixture where it's like, okay, the pressure's on, 3 points are on the line, I need to be here, here, and here, but I haven't played in 3 weeks, so I don't know. It's not a second nature sort of vibe, and I think that's one side of the equation. I think the other side of the equation is, I know Chiefy is very tactically flexible as well, and I think I raised this point a couple of weeks ago, might have been on one of our predictions videos. It's almost reminding me of like a Jose Mourinho, where it's like it goes well for 2 seasons, but then sides figure it out. Like the opposition figures it out. And I wonder if with Chiefy, it was a 1 season, flash in the pan sort of vibe, and then oppositions have just figured it out and they're able to shut him down that way. And so I'd like to see them do some stuff in the transfer window in January and have a strong back half of the season. I don't know who's available that would fit what Chiefy's trying to do in the positions that they need it, and that is, I think, a big concern. Is that, to use Glory as an example, to go back to what we're doing, they've had several mutual terminations a few weeks ago, where it's like, okay, they brought these players in because they thought they could do the job, and then it turns out they couldn't. Wellington, especially in a January transfer window, just can't afford to get that wrong.
Yeah.
I feel like this game just shows the style of managers as well, the difference, right? So Chiefy, you're saying Jacob maybe overcomplicates things at some points, and I feel like that's just evident in this game where Vidmar seems to me like a manager who likes to keep things simple and maybe doesn't make that many tweaks for game to game, so it doesn't really try and revolutionize the side. in the short training period between games and try and introduce too much. He seems like somebody who keeps it simple but lets the players and shine as individuals. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
whereas, yeah, it definitely seems the Phoenix had struggles in this game, and that seemed like it was a lack of conviction from them and a lack of faith maybe in the way they're being told to play, and maybe it is an overcoaching kind of thing, and they're just not fully confident in what they're trying to do, and yeah, it's that can you can go too far that way. We love Chiefy when he gets that tactical stuff right and he just makes those tweaks and he just absolutely dominates an opponent and exploits them in the right way in the right areas. So satisfying for Jacob, for the tactical nerds of our A-League enjoyers. But then this is a game where it looked like it went wrong, and even like it's that City press. It's Vidmar would play like that in kind of a lot of the games. They'll press that higher, and that really exploited Phoenix's weakness and that, as I said, lack of conviction, especially with that build up from out the back. So they were just turning the ball over constantly, really high up the field and all deep in their own, defensive third. And City would just win the ball back, have one pass, and then it would be 2-on-2. And too many scenarios like that, if you just give the opposition too many chances like that, they're gonna score and take them, which is what they did. I really also, just to mention, I really liked Romani's little flick assist at the end for Atkinson's. Nice. That was just lovely. That was kind of what I was talking about. With that, they come out of the City Academy with that little bit of flair and creativity. Whereas Phoenix, they're always going to be, as you said, Poletti, they do have a different approach in the transfer market, and Chiefy has done really well to get a lot out of a squad that is, they're playing a lot of the time, better football than they are than the sum of their parts, right? Like he gets a lot out of them, but it's not a team where you can really let the individual shine like it is at others, right? I think it's just, this game more than any other, for me, has highlighted the difference in approach of that, of setting up a nice base for your players to then, get that last 10% out of, or trying to tell your players and just overcoach them to that final product and try and get all of it down to a fine detail, right? Like that was just the difference for me in this one.
Yeah, I think one of the big concerns as well is that even when they've played poorly this season, they've still been able to score, and typically that's on the counter, and it's been, Costa Barbarouses or somebody that gets on the end of it, but they've still been able to be a threat in attack. But in this game, they weren't even that, right? They could do nothing. And you mentioned the press from City was a key part of that, but it felt like they just couldn't get anything going whatsoever. And we haven't really seen that from them this season. So, it's almost like it's a little bit of a regression. We're not seeing that improvement yet, and actually things might be getting worse. So there's a lot of work for Wellington to do heading into January with the transfer window and moving forwards and evaluating where they're at. Are they going to make a push for finals this year, or are they writing themselves out? I guess their action in the transfer market will determine that. In the other games we had this weekend, Newcastle, the Jets, they've been struggling this season, but they've put in a couple of good performances, and they were on upset alert again against the Sky Blues. Well, I say upset. Sydney haven't been themselves this year and haven't quite reached the highs that we expected of them, but they're coming off the back of a 3-0 victory over the Victory in the Big Blue. Good result. They come into this game and they're just poor. They're flat. In the first half, couldn't control the game whatsoever, had very little possession, partly based on their structure. So I noticed that they used this 2-3 shape in build-up with 2 defenders, 3 players in that second level, and they just couldn't really get anything going. They were just shut down by the Jets. In the second half, credit to Tale, made an adjustment, brought an extra player back, so it was then a 3-2, and they had, I think, 65% possession in that second half, and obviously they got back into the game. But for the Jets, I think perhaps they might be actually better than their record shows, Poletti, because it was another game for them where they were able to be threatening on the counter, they were able to score goals and be efficient in the final third, but they just couldn't see it over the line again.
I mean, I'd say that 8v11 in a 13-team league would have absolutely been an upset. It's coming in, but I mean, it's the 2-1-6 this season, 11-4, 15 again, so only a -4 goal differential. Which, when you think Newcastle Jets, just with some of the results they've had, you'd think that they'd been shipping goals for fun, but they've actually been very tight at the back. Their problem has been that they just don't have it up front to sort of to counteract that. Whereas, like I said, we look at Western Sydney, 26-4, 22 against. They've got the attacking power up front, but they just don't have it defensively. And so we know the sort of position that Newcastle is in, where it's not like they can afford to go out, when the transfer window opens and just splash cash to sort of
Yeah.
fix some of their issues. They very much have to be a club that's building from within. Um, I mean, the other thing you have to remember as well is that they've played the least amount of games so far of anyone in the league. They've only had 9 games. They've had two. They've had their 2 buys already.
Mm.
So I'm not saying points in hand situation, but I mean, if they were to win their games in hand, that closes their gap to 10th on the Phoenix, who sit 6 points above them already. So it's like it's one of those situations where the table tells one side of the story, but what they're doing on the pitch tells another side of the story.
Yeah.
And I think if they could just find a way to have that finishing touch, like if they win this game, that's another 2 points that are in the bag. This is really a 2 points dropped situation for them. If they could just
Yeah.
find a way to win some of these games, they'll go a lot better this season than I think a lot of people had them penciled in for. It's just
Mm.
how do they do that? Because it's also not clicking on the pitch, and we've heard some of Robbie Stanton's thoughts on that throughout the year as well.
Yeah, I just want to stick with you for a moment, actually, because we sort of made this joke pre-recording, but it seems like Sydney have really embraced the one club philosophy, because both their men's and women's teams have been very sort of inconsistent and struggled with form this season. And yes, okay, they got the win in the Big Blue in the men's side last week, but outside of that, they've been pretty hit or miss, and it's the same obviously with the women's side. I'm not suggesting that there's a culture at the club that doesn't value winning, because that's absolute rubbish. Obviously, it's Sydney FC, of course they value winning, but perhaps is there something? It's something a little bit deeper than just the performances on the pitch as to why this is happening.
No, I don't think so. I think Sydney FC on the men's side have recruited very well, but they haven't been able to have everyone on the pitch at the same time. Because when they've had
Yeah,
everyone on the pitch at the same time, they've been absolutely incredible this season. But I'm looking at I was just say, whereas on the women's side, it's sort of been they had a lot of players go out. They've been struggling to click, and we'll talk more about this on the Dubcast tomorrow. But
good plug.
it looked very well in terms of their performance against Melbourne City both times they've played them this season, and they've only really dropped points because of goalkeeper errors in those 2 games. And Melbourne City are the runaway league leaders at the moment. So I think for both sides, the sum of the parts are there to be doing better than they are. But I'll come back to the men for a moment. Looking at their record here, or the games they've played so far this season. So if we go back to, let me do some math. 1, 2, round 3, MacArthur 2, Sydney FC 1, red card. We go to Central Coast Mariners 2, Sydney FC 1, red card.
Red card.
We then actually, I thought there was a third red card. I was. Yes, there was a third red card. Round 1, Western Sydney Wanderers 1, Sydney FC 2, red card. There's been injuries. They just haven't been able to keep everyone.
Nothing's gone right.
They just haven't been able to keep everyone on the pitch at the same time. Because if they can run out their full strength 11, they will take it to anyone in this league and beat them more often than not. The problem is that they just haven't had everyone on the pitch at the same time, whether by their own doing, red cards, or not by their own doing, injuries.
Yeah.
And so, they've got a game against Perth Glory on Wednesday. It's, one of these many, many midweek fixtures that are coming up. I think we've got A-Leagues action across both competitions basically every day for like the next week and a half.
I believe so, yeah.
Which is absolutely brilliant. I'm so looking forward to it. Just get to park myself on the couch every night and just tune into some A-Leagues action. So look, if there was ever a get right game for Sydney FC, Perth Glory, surely. That being said, well, it's probably also one of those classic banana skin fixtures, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And you mentioned keeping players on the pitch. Somebody who I think hasn't had the season that probably his expectations are set much higher is Joe Lolly, right? Like he's been almost sort of invisible at times this season, but it was a vintage finish from him in this game. Cut inside, hit it on his left into the corner. Nothing anybody can do about it. Not least Ryan Scott, right? You cannot put him at fault for that one. But that second goal they conceded, Will, as the resident goalkeeper at Round Ball, I want to get your thoughts on it, because to me, it seemed like he did so well on that first ball in to punch it clear, and then a complete brain fade to chase after it in that second phase and try and get the second one. Ultimately missed, ended up on the ground, ball goes in the back of the net. He's been one of arguably the better keepers in the league this season, in a season where we've seen a lot of goalkeeper mistakes, and he's not been one to be prone for them. He's now finally joined the club. It seemed to me like a pretty silly mistake to make, especially so late in the game.
Yeah, look, Ryan Scott is one of my favorite players, one of my favorite goalkeepers in the league. So maybe that's a bit of bias talking here, but I don't think it was maybe not an error or mistake in that way. I think it was that second punch was just a little bit of a misjudgment. Right. He does exactly what he needs to on the first one. Doesn't get the mileage on it away from goal. So does go follow it up, because it does go up in the air. He has, right to go look and claim that second one, right? But you can see in that second punch that he changes his mind from a claim over, I think it was Patrick Wood's head. Last minute changes to a little punch, right? And then that's why that second punch doesn't get the distance it should have, right? So I think he makes a fine decision. Maybe that second decision is debatable to go follow up that first punch. He couldn't have claimed that first ball. No, that's fine. Second one, he probably, if he goes, he needs to claim.
Yeah.
You never see keepers go for a double punch like this. It's a unique situation, right? Because, if you're following it up, you should be looking to claim that. And he does look to do that until the last second when he changes to a fist there to punch it, and it just doesn't come off. I mean, Caceres also does, executes perfectly off that. There's 6 Jets players on the line there for any shot coming in, right? There's so many bodies. He had to execute that shot exactly how he did it for it to go in. So it's a calamity of all sorts for that to end up in the back of the net, and really highlight that was, a little bit of an error. A little bit of an error. I don't think, I won't be as harsh as
not put it too much on him. Yeah,
I don't think so, because it's just that little change of mind that really did him badly there. So for me, not too bad. It just it was a perfect storm for that to end up in the back of the net, and he saved them so many times through this season already, and the previous season that I don't think it wasn't as bad as the other keeping errors that we've seen this season, for sure, for me.
Yeah, and probably wasn't as bad as the Brisbane Roar performance that we saw either this weekend, because there's nothing going right for the Roar. It's another own goal for them. They couldn't finish the chances they did create. They couldn't hold on for the draw. Hossein Billity got sent off. Just, you said the word calamity before, Will, and I think that perfectly sums up the Brisbane game as well. I mean, for me, one of the few positives that you could take from it is that Ben Halloran scored, I guess. He did his job. He got in a good position. He finished the ball well. We actually had Kevin Sangster write an article for the Roundball Australia website about a few of the positives that Raw fans can take from the season, and it's mostly individual players, right? And especially the youngsters. He mentioned Waddingham, Harrington, and Quinn McNichol, as well as the others. And I think that's going to be the case for them this season, Will, for the fans, is just find whatever silver linings you can, because on the pitch it's not going to be great.
If they turn that game off after that first goal, fantastic performance. It was really that was a really, really well worked goal, and I think it did highlight a weakness in that Mariners backline as well, right? So Paul doesn't slide over. You're playing in that kind of back five they started off the game with, and Paul doesn't slide over. They're double marking the striker, and then Docker loses his man at kind of wing back there. Or he was in that phase of play anyway, and it was just really nice finish first time. There are positives to look for these Brisbane fans. And I think Brizete is another one. Yep. Plays with really a lot of energy. And there's enough there. I think just watching Waddingham is worth, the admission of a ticket alone. I think he's such a joy to watch, and, didn't have the output in this game, but there's enough there this game wasn't really the one to watch. If
Yeah.
if you missed this game, I think you'd be
He
happier.
didn't miss much.
You didn't miss much. Just yeah. I mean, and to let the Mariners side that have struggled to kind of score, like put three against you away, it just shows it all. And that own goal, the start, it's unfortunate, but just no confidence in that defense, and clearing that first ball leads to it kind of thing, like a little bit of a bouncing around there, and unfortunate in some ways, but also just indicative of kind of their confidence they have in their own defending as well. Because they made Mariners look a lot better than I think they are in this game.
I think you touched on something really well there. It's that they look to have the pieces there, right? And so, Poletti, I'm going to put this question to you because we've not had your input on it, but obviously there's been a lot of talk about Zadkovic and how long does he have in this job? And obviously the club came out last week and backed him. I read it as thinly veiled. We don't back him. We want to get rid of him, but we're just going to come out in support of him. Sort of the classic European football approach of things, of just trying to play it cool. That's how I read it. The others, Lockie and Christian, were going, no, they clearly back him. I want to get your opinion on this because he's not doing anything right. He's not winning over the fans. He's not winning over the players. He's not getting performances. How long do you give him?
I mean, maybe I'm too jaded by my American sports watching experiences, but like you hear this, they've got the full support of the board, whoever it is, and then literally, not even 2 games later, you're out the door. See you later. You're sacked. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I don't know. So I read it very much the same way you did. I did agree with Lockie's point that A-League clubs don't necessarily have the funds to be hiring and firing coaches at will. It's not like you look at some of these European clubs who have, 4 coaches on the books that they're still paying off because they've handed out 4-year contracts and sacked them all within 6 months, sort of vibe. But at the same time, it's a difficult one, right? Because there's no relegation in the A-League, but you're trying to get fans back on board. And, to go back to Kevin's article, they've got some very good youngsters there. And so, it's how long you can stick with this when, we saw Perth draw less than 5,000 people. I said they were going to get less than 6,000 because I didn't think it was going to be anywhere near 4,500. I thought maybe 5,600 would have been a good sort of crowd for Perth at the moment. They're playing in a cavernous stadium. They've got sections shut off to the fans because they don't want to staff them because there's literally no one there to staff them for. And you're playing games like this in primetime spots. No one wants to go spend money to watch that. So this season you can put a red line through it. But I mean, what coaches are available that are going to have this side playing better football?
That's the other
other
point,
question
right?
as well, right? And the sort of coaches that you can get are going to be commanding not an insignificant amount of money, especially when they know what's going on at the Raw in terms of the crowd numbers and everything like that. As I believe Sam Kerr has just found one of his balls with the bell on it, which is absolutely wonderful for me. I mean, Ben Khan last year was supposed to be the saviour. We saw what he did at NPL Victoria, and then that lasted only a couple of months before Zadkovic came in for reasons that had nothing to do with the performances on the park. I believe it was health reasons in the end, which is why Ben Khan had to step away. But I mean, what coaches lining up to go to Brisbane to coach this side? I mean, Will, have you got your C license yet? Can we get you up there to fix the issues at the Raw?
Nearly, but I need a few more, I think, to then be in line for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I read it in the way that, like, it's, oh no, we gave him a 2-year contract, we gave Zadkovic 2 years, and we can't afford to pay him out. So of that, so like, we're obviously just going to back him because I don't think they'll fire him. It just seems like a few odd business decisions from Brisbane there, and have led to this. And Ben Khan, that's still stuff up in the air. I think stuff's still trickling along in the background about that, and I'm keen to see what plays out with that in the end. And and I want to know a bit more about that situation for sure. But yeah, as you said, just as long as Zadkovic is at the helm here, I just don't have any confidence that he can really turn this season around. It's. I mean, Lockie's prediction is getting funnier and funnier as the weeks go on, right? I'm loving it.
It's moving into Adelaide's second from Crystal Park. It's going to go down to something that we're still going to be bringing up in 2 years' time. Why? Funny.
Somebody has to put a MasterCard of all the times
really
he
bad ones.
He backed himself weeks and weeks. And I think he's peeling back a little bit now, but it was funny at first.
It's so good. But well, I mean, speaking of turning seasons around, the Mariners will. Are they doing it? I mean, it seems like they might be back in business, right? Yeah, okay. The scoreline perhaps flattered them and started playing against Brisbane. But, they were relatively clinical. They did the job. They came away unscathed. You can look to build on that sort of a performance. And I know that there was one player performance in particular that you took notice of, which was De Lima, who got a debut and his goal. So we're starting to see some of that new generation of Mariners players coming through as well.
Yeah, and they sit in that middle table area of clubs that are just all pretty close to each other, and so they can still, like, nothing's written off for them, right? They're 4 points off fourth. It's not, nothing's out of the question in that respect. So plenty to play for there, and I was pleased with De Lima and getting a goal on his debut as well was awesome. As dubious as that goal being awarded to him kind of was. It was I don't really know. I think he got it in the end. They stuck with it, with giving it to him. But no, really happy for him to get his chance, and was somebody that I saw in the NPL a little bit last year as well, and who was even with their junior NPL side, right, that would play before so their under-20s of their under-20s team, right? Yeah. So he was in their reserve team, and got his chance last season, broke through late into that first NPL starting squad, and was really impressive. I remember specifically a game against Apia that I saw, where him and Bailey Brantman were the two stand-up players, and at that stage Brantman had already received A-League minutes and shown what he could do. So obviously, he was standout in that regard, but De Lima was the second best on the field basically, and was really key to that, to their win on that night. So they beat Apia in a massive game and survived relegation. Basically, that was a massive one for them. But basically, long-winded ways of saying, I scouted him before all everyone's seeing him now, and that I've got shared joy with his performance. No, but really good, and definitely good for Jackson to be showing faith in this new roster of players coming through, as we've seen so many seasons now. That's so important to that team. Yeah. It's just incredibly important, and what that team's based off. So, no, very good in that regard. Will Wilson gets a start here. We're still dealing with the kind of the fallout of some shenanigans over the Christmas period, I think. So Kasevsky and Moragas are still missing from the lineups, and this team, the matchday squads, really. So that is why also that De Lima had to be called upon in that wide area. So kind of a rotated lineup here. Theo gets a start as well. A good performance considering those things as well. Sainsbury gets some more minutes back into his legs, which is good. Only lasted 65 minutes, but that's just going to be how he's introduced back into this squad after his injury. His match fitness will be lacking a little bit, and still, as always, it shows in the side the versatility that they have. That those in-game shuffles that Jackson makes with players. You've got players like Docker who can just play any position on the field, and they have so much flexibility throughout a game when they're bringing subs on to make not just personnel changes and not straight swaps, but those little in-game movements around. So no, good result here. Kind of needed that. If they didn't beat them, there's question marks, right? Like the Mariners drew against Perth at home when everyone else was smacking them. So good for them to get this one. Steele with a great goal as well, like a really good ball in from Rue and a good kind of looping header, I'd say, for Steele. But just all round good performance. Parach Cullen excellent as well in goal. I don't think he'll be sitting around too long in this Mariners side. I think still really young, obviously, so looks deserving if he was to get a move. Some point through now at the end of the season, for sure. So just good from everyone. No standouts, but a good performance away for sure.
And the final game of the round took us to Campbelltown, a stormy Campbelltown, Poletti, for MacArthur Mondays. It delivered again. Really entertaining game of football, with Adelaide managing to steal the points when MacArthur had gone ahead 1-0 late in the game, sort of flipping the script on what has happened to Adelaide this season, where they've dropped points at home from winning positions. They've done the same to MacArthur here. It's rarely a dull game between these two, especially on a Monday night, especially in Campbelltown. And speaking of games in Campbelltown, this was a record crowd between these two sides at Campbelltown. 3,789 was the crowd number. But watching from TV, Poletti, it seemed like a really entertaining game. We sort of spoke briefly at the start about conditions. Do you think that really played much of an impact into things? And the pitch looked a bit patchy as well. Was it as bad as it looked on TV?
No, I think the pitch was fine. I think the conditions did play into it a little bit. But yeah, so I mean, it was 2,000 people, COVID season, for 4-0 MacArthur Adelaide. Then there was 2,702 for 4-1, 3,213 for 2-0. That classic MacArthur Mondays last year that kicked it all off, 4-3 for MacArthur, 2,596. And then, 3,789 tonight for what was Adelaide's first win at Campbelltown after what did they just say it was 5 attempts. So Vet said that in the post game press conference. He acknowledges it's a very difficult place to come and play. And I don't know. I don't know why it is, but just a lot of sides do seem to struggle at Campbelltown. Maybe it's just the cowbells. Maybe the players can't handle hearing the constant ringing of the cowbells. And I do want to give props to MacArthur there. In their pre-game hype video, they've actually incorporated now the more cowbell skit from Saturday Night Live with Christopher Walken. Which that's good gear from MacArthur. I properly rate that.
They're embracing it, yeah.
They are, So, but I mean, on the game itself, I mean, this was, stalemate for what was the first 70 minutes. Both sides had a couple of chances. Adelaide more so than what MacArthur did. A couple of very good saves from Philip Curto. And then it really blew open in the last 20 minutes. Jermaine in the 80th, followed by Zach Klopp's penalty in the 85th. And then Jovanovic with, a very early goal of the year contender, which I think by the time the year rolls out, it'll go very far down the list. But in terms of goals, it's right up there to start the year.
Great finish.
Very good finish, as you just said. On the penalty, I'm not convinced it was a penalty. I think, I will acknowledge there was contact there, but De Cooley's made an absolute meal of it, right? He's gone. It's almost like for those, one for the wrestling fans, the finger poke of doom, where it's just like wrestling fans don't know exactly what I'm talking about here, where it's just a little poke that's just gone down completely. Like that's all it really looked like. It just looked like the most minimal contact. And look, any player worth their salt is gonna make a meal of it. But yeah, look, I think. I think for me, I don't think the penalty was the right decision, but I don't think there's enough there from VAR to overturn it.
See, I think from my perspective is that defenders have to know better than to put their foot in for a challenge there. De Cooley had gotten past him by that point, running laterally across the box. He's not going to be a threat to score. He's running into two more defenders, and he just leaves a boot in there. And yes, okay, there's minimal contact, but it's enough to sort of keep that trailing foot behind De Cooley. He can't plant it again, falls over, and the referee as well. Good positioning from him. Credit to that, because he was right up there immediately, could see what was happening. You can see why it seems like a harsh call, but Will, to me, the defender has to be smarter than to put a foot in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I was fully in agreement with you in the group chat, sorry, Poletti, but just that type of challenge, right? Like that type of challenge where you're fully, that's okay at halfway when you're stepping across the attacker and trying to win the ball back that way, where you can use the momentum and go with them. But he just didn't do that, right? And he stuck a leg out, and as much as De Cooley exaggerated the contact, maybe it's just a type of challenge that will just lead to penalties. Like you just fully block the path of that attacker, and that kind of thing just happens, in my opinion. So yeah, kind of pretty stonewall for me there. And I don't know, Adelaide finding another way to kind of snatch points here, which is good for them. But MacArthur kind of not threw it away, but could have got something.
It feels like a lost opportunity for them, right? Because this could have put them second. Instead, Adelaide are now second, so a big swing there.
Yeah.
So that's all the games that we had from the last round of football. But there's been a little bit of player movements again. Obviously, we're edging closer and closer towards the transfer window opening late next week. I believe it is the 16th of January that it officially opens for the A-League. So there are teams starting to make some moves already, probably with an eye towards being able to make some replacements or some acquisitions in that transfer window. The Roar have had a couple. So Harry van der Sarg has left the club on compassionate grounds. So wish him all the best. From what the press release has said, he's heading back home to New South Wales to be with family. Obviously the Raw haven't been performing well, and people have been very critical of his performances, but you can't wish him any ill will here. And I think it's a really good gesture from the club as well to allow him to leave in this situation and to back him with it as well. But in some better news for the Raw, they've had somebody come in, or return rather. Henry Hoare has come back to the club. Obviously, one of the bright spots last season, looked really dynamic and really threatening. He's come back from a loan stint from Korea. And then, again, confirming that Joe Coletti has left the club as well for an overseas opportunity. So Brisbane are obviously a club that their position in the table would dictate that they want to make some acquisitions, but also the movements that they've made already would say that they're probably going to bring a couple of players in. And in terms of other confirmed movements...
Just before you move on, I want to say I personally am happy that Coletti has left the Raw and the A-Leagues as a whole. It feels weird when you have an A-League game on in the background and you just hear the name Coletti, and I'm just like, who's calling my name? Because I'm half acknowledging it, because all I hear is the Letty part of it.
Letty,
so
yeah.
I'm very as someone who has only one name and as a player that has a surname very, very close to that, I personally am thrilled because it means I can half-ass watch Brisbane Raw games again and not worry that my name's been called 20 times.
There you go. An unexpected positive sign there from that move. But yeah, the other confirmed...
some sort of overseas move, good on him.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But the other confirmed move that we have is Mitch Glasson, Sydney FC Academy product. He's headed on loan to Finland, of all places. Sort of a little bit of a Luke Ivanovic move about that. Obviously the young Perth striker that moved to, I think he's in Iceland now or something like that. So, wish him the best there in his development, playing in Europe, playing in some very cold weather as well, which is not complete opposite to what it's like in summer in Australia. There's another move that's happened that's not quite A-League, but I've included it because former A-League player, Australian defender Dylan Fox has signed for the league leaders in Singapore. And then the final and I think most interesting thing is a rumour that we've seen a little bit about on social media for the last couple of days. Jason Guerrier, there's rumours that he might be headed to Japan. Now, Will, we spoke about the Wanderers looking to get defenders, and one of the names I brought up there was Deng, who will be available. Former Victory player, could slot right into the hole that Guerrier would leave if he was to leave the club. I think that if that's the case, yes, it sucks to lose a player of Guerrier's quality, but if there's the chance to bring Deng back in, I don't think you'd be too unhappy as a Victory fan, right?
No, that would exactly. That would be an apt replacement there, and kind of a ready-made one that we know would work straight away. And Victory also have Josh has Josh Rawlins there who plays in a really similar way to Guerrier, who can fill in at right back and centre back and offer that same exact positional output that Guerrier did, and allow that team to play like it does, and allow Boss to bomb up the left and he tucks in a little bit and yeah. So I mean, either way they've got options there, but they'd definitely be looking to replace to look for another starter, I think, to replace Gary, because that's a lot of talent you're losing there, and somebody who's just got consistently more, has consistently improved as the years have gone by for him, and deserves a move. It's to be said as well.
And Final thing as well, not a player, a coach. Mark Milligan has left Adelaide United as assistant. He's headed to the Malaysian national setup as an assistant coach there, which Poletti, we've made a big deal about Patrick Kisnorbo's move as an assistant to the J1 league and being sort of, I suppose, a lateral or a sideways move from being the head coach of the Victory. It seems like a strange move for Milligan, somebody who's been highly touted as one of the next head coaches in the A-League and potentially taking that Victory spot. He's out of the equation now, so that's a big thing for the Victory. They've got to find, there's no suggestion that he was the top of their list, but there were a lot of people talking about him, so they've got to find someone else. And it seems an interesting move for his career as well to move to a national setup as an assistant for a relatively small Asian side.
It is, but I actually don't hate this move for Milligan. I think if you want to get some international coaching experience, I think there's a lot worse jobs that you could be taking than the Malaysian league, Malaysia. You're staying in Asia, and particularly if you have ambitions to come back to the A-League and be a coach, some of those sorts of connections that you can make on the continent proper are going to be invaluable. And it's something that, we quite often say that Australian sides don't take enough of an advantage of, is signing players from from the Asian countries, particularly in Southeast Asia. Like Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia. They just don't take enough of an advantage of it. So like building those sorts of connections, if he's going to go for a couple of years, come back to the A-League could absolutely be invaluable. But one that you haven't had on your list here that I'm excited to see turns out is Joey Champness is reported to have gone to Havana in Iran. I wonder what the hip hop scene's like in Iran and whether he can continue balancing both careers.
It's funny you bring that up because I did see some of their fans on social media going about, well, it says on his Wikipedia that he's a rapper, and talking about that. So, very interesting move there. I'm not sure how I missed that one, so thanks for bringing that up.
And then Kai Rowles has been rumoured to be heading off to DC United in the MLS as well for a reported £600,000 transfer fee. Will, going back to something you said in our group chat, he screams MLS to me. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Like in a good way. It just feels right. I don't know. The way he kind of plays the type of centre-back he is, it feels like a lot of MLS clubs kind of move for that, mobile and kind of somewhat ball-playing centre-back. I don't know. It just made sense in my head. Love the guy. No bad words to say about him. Has done and continues to do a good job for the Socceroos when needed, and wish him well over there. But it just seems right in a non-derogatory way.
It's just right. Well, we're expecting to see a lot more movement over the coming days and weeks, obviously, as I said, with the window opening up. But for now, that's all we've got, and that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Bit of a longer one today, well over an hour, but that's because there was plenty to talk about. So hopefully you stuck around for it, and thank you to those who did. And thank you as well to my guests tonight. Will, thank you very much for coming on. It's a rare occasion to have you on, but it's always good when you are.
Yes, thank you. Good to dust off the cobwebs a bit and get back on here. Felt bad, leaving you as host and stranded somewhat. Putting out SOS messages in the group chat, so I thought I'd reappear.
Well, you've helped out massively, and likewise, Poletti for rushing home from MacArthur Mondays to get in and start up this podcast and join me for it as well. Thank you very much.
And I wasn't expecting quite such a long one, but if you're an aficionado of long podcasts, I would definitely recommend tuning into the Dubcast tomorrow. I have a feeling that with 15 games to talk about and a bunch of coaching changes and just other stuff happening around Australian women's football to talk about, that it might be pushing well over the hour mark as well. So if you love your long podcast, tune in, and if you don't love your long podcast, tune in anyway. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow night.
Well, good plug there, Poletti, getting it in right at the end. But yes, like I said, that'll be all for this episode of the Ramble Australia podcast. We'll be back on Friday as per usual. I think we've got a few midweek games to cover. As I said, I'm sure there'll be some transfer news, and there's probably going to be some big controversy because there always is in Australian football. So stick around, tune in for that one. But other than that, thank you very much for listening, guys. Goodbye.